Hello folks, and welcome to Mesoamerica, your place for Mesoamerican occult knowledge, magic, and overall myth. This episode is a little bit different. This episode is about what is going on today in our world and how can we reflect the knowledge that we have learned from Mesoamerican people to this very day. And this is one of the most crucial aspects of our lives, believe it or not. What I'm talking about is what has been happening in this year and last year. The path of our civilization may very well be changing, and I am not kidding. The fact that the Chinese space program are finding gigantic pieces of metal and water-like things, water-like balloons in the moon, is something that should concern us. we should know that reality may not be what we think. We probably want to deny it, but the fact is that science is there. Physicists today are saying that our reality may not be what we think it is, that it may be a holographic reality, it might have been programmed by something else. This is not me saying this. Go watch the videos by Dyson DeGraw and many other physicists. And another thing that has been happening, and what is to me most concerning, is that the CIA had been conducting, thanks to the Freedom of Information Act, the CIA have been conducting experiments and studies on alien communication and CIA psychics, etc., etc. But what does that have to do with us? And what does that have to do with the Mesoamerica channel? There's so much that I learned when I started to read the lines of the narratives between the Aztecs and the Spanish. Stephen Hawking himself said that he will not be so quick to look for alien life because what happened to the Aztecs might happen to us. And so this is what this one is all about. Anyway, thank you very much, and let's dig into it. Let's go. What happened to the Aztecs when the Spanish arrived was the worst thing that could have happened to them, and not only to the Aztecs, also to all the nations that lived in this continent. And the reason why this is because about 90% of the population was exterminated, not necessarily by war, but by disease and many other factors. And as a result, we need to understand what is it that Stephen Hawking was talking about. What is it that happens when two civilizations that were unknown to one another meet? Recently, I watched this documentary about this Brazilian UFO that might have happened, and there's something peculiar about this particular experience. There's a story of this young soldier who happened to be carrying one of the beings that supposedly fell off from the sky, and he died shortly after. Well, according to some physicists, I'm talking about particularly about Mr. Alcubierre, Mexican physicist, he is saying that if there was a ship that could travel through, that could bend space and time, the ship will be subject to Hawking radiation. And this radiation will kill any human pretty fast, just like it happened with this young Brazilian soldier. As to whether those beings were aliens or not, who knows, but this is not the first story that has happened about communication or interaction between humans and aliens where aliens seem to be radioactive. And humans are not very susceptible to radiation, and therefore they die pretty quickly after either contacting a ship or contacting a being. And this is based on narratives, but the narrative seems to be the same, and we should not disregard it even if aliens don't exist. This is why. It is because this is what happened to the Aztecs. When the Spanish arrived into this continent, the people from this continent were their autoimmune system was not as strong as the European autoimmune system, particularly because they were very clean. They showered a lot. They ate healthy foods. They always kept everything fresh. They didn't eat a lot of animals. Whereas the Europeans were more susceptible to be around dirty places, dirty things, eating rotten things. And so there was a difference in the autoimmune system of both of the people. So if there is any truth and validity to aliens, it is the fact that we need to be careful not only in contacting them, or also in how do we approach them psychologically. In the book History of the Indies of New Spain by Fray Duran, we get a lot of information as to what was the perspective of the Aztecs before the arrival of the Spanish, and what was the perspective afterwards, or what were the facts afterwards. We learn a lot about how did the Spanish approach the Aztecs, and how did the Aztecs and how did the Spanish react. Now, this is exactly what is happening today in our minds. We learn some things about aliens that are being displayed in the news or on TV. The government releases certain pieces of information. All government officials release pieces of information. And it just creates a narrative in our minds that is not based on reality. And that is exactly what happened to the Aztec king Moctezuma. Moctezuma heard stories about the impending destruction of the Aztec Empire. Some of these narratives were 100 years old before the arrival of the Spanish. Some of these narratives talked about the arrival of the re-arrival of the god Quetzalcoatl. Some of them talked about smoking clouds that hovered over the oceans, and it carried strange men and creatures. And so these stories were very old. They came from the Nahuales that belonged to the courts of the Aztecs, to Moctezuma, to Ixtloatl, to Tizoc, to multiple kings. But it really hit hard to Moctezuma because it was his time. It wasn't like, the stories of Cuauhtemoc. It was the guy that had to do something was Moctezuma. And this arrival of the Spanish into the Aztec psyche was very dangerous, because the Aztecs didn't know anything about the Spaniards. All they heard was legends and weird stories, but the Spanish were smarter than that. They sent spies to King Moctezuma, the great speaker. And as such, they were able to know way more about the Aztec Empire and about Moctezuma than Moctezuma ever knew about the Spanish. There's a story from Duran that there's a native that arrives to the court of Moctezuma. He has no ears, he has no thumbs, and he tells him that he saw these supernatural beings in these cloud-like ships hovering over the ocean, therefore confirming the previous visions of the Nahuales, of the wizards or seers, whatever you want to call them. And so therefore Moctezuma was distressed. He was obviously distressed, and this is exactly what the Spanish wanted. They wanted the king to be afraid. There's a lot of commonalities between what Cortés did to the Aztecs and what Alexander the Great did to the Babylonians. For example, Alexander the Great used to pray to Phobos to try to inflict fear upon his enemies. And he also sent spies to certain regions to try to find out information. Ultimately, Cortés was able to win by blockading the island of Tenochtitlan, in the same way in which Alexander sometimes blockaded some of his enemies. And so it's obvious that Cortés knew very well his military history, and as a result, he sent a man that they had been torturing for a very long time. and to try to scare Moctezuma and to find out information, particularly whether he was afraid, because this was the time that they will deem most appropriate to go visit the Aztecs. Because before that, they were trying to make some alliances with some Aztec enemies, which also proved to be very detrimental. And this strategy of how to attack the Aztecs became very important for Cortés, not only for his survival, but also for what changed the history of the nations of this continent. And these men with no ears and no thumbs obviously scared Moctezuma. Moctezuma, at this time, we learned that he imprisoned him with his diviners. And so this is exactly what's happening today. We are the Moctezuma. We ridicule anybody that speaks about aliens, any information about possible ships that we're not able to ascertain as to how do they move. We ridicule it. The government censors it. In this Brazilian documentary, people were threatened. Some people disappeared. And as a result, we need to know more. It is obvious that the Spanish utilized information to know when to attack, how do they behave, and how to use that behavior to destroy these particular nations. Now, these aliens, I'm pretty sure they're way more powerful or way more technology advanced than we are, if they're able to travel through stars or time or space or dimensions. And as a result, they may want nothing to do with us. We may be of no resource to them whatsoever. And that is probably the most likely answer, since they seem to be so advanced and they have never really asked that many things from us. But there may not be only one type of civilization. There may be others. And we also need to understand that it is information that brings power to the people, and not censorship and the unknown. Another thing that we can learn about this man with no ears and no thumbs is that he escaped. And Moctezuma attributed this to some supernatural type of things. The fact that these native with no ears escaped was that indicative that they were spies within Moctezuma's court. That there were people that they allowed these men to escape, and as this man was able to escape, he was likely going to give his report to the Spaniards as to how was the king distressed and how the whole court reacted. This was very important pieces of information for the Spaniards, particularly because they knew that if Moctezuma was scared, that he was not going to attack them, and if the court did not react, it meant that Moctezuma was that held all the weapons, all the power over the military, and that other people were not going to attack them. It was just brilliant. Sending this torture spy to Moctezuma was of great use for the Spanish. And we have to also learn that we may have spies among us, not necessarily like alien spies or any supernatural or thing that can be ridiculed, but it can be that some people in the government, hence that's why these ex-government officials could be talking about aliens. It could be because they're trying to create a narrative into the people's minds to try to manipulate it into a way in which they can take advantage of. Aliens may never, and probably will never, contact us. But the narrative of invasion, or the narrative of evolution, how these beings could be from another planet and they somehow evolve faster than us, or all those narratives that are based in supposition and not facts, are just dangerous. And so it will be, I'm going to start to create some of these chapters, episodes, on what can we learn? What can we learn about the Aztecs and about human behavior? And how do we see ourselves in their feed, and this information may be useful to us. So this one, the arrival episode, is the first of this series. Thank you very much. Hopefully you will keep watching my episodes. Thank you very much for your kind attention and for everything that you do. Thank you. Bye-bye.
So this is something I feel like, if I was the president, and it's unlikely that that is ever going to happen.
You never know.
If I was the president...
It was unlikely that I was going to be president.
The moment I was inaugurated, my hand would just, it'd still be hot from touching the Bible, and I would immediately race to wherever they have the files about Area 51 and the UFOs, and I'd go through everything to find out what happened.
Right.
Did you do that?
That's why you will not be president. Because that's the first thing that you would do.
It's at
the aliens won't let it happen. You reveal all their secrets. They exercise strict control over us.
Now, you know, there are a lot of people that are going to examine your facial expressions here, every twitch, everything, and say, and of course, so did you look? Did you see? Did you explore?
I can't reveal anything.
Oh, really? Because President Clinton said he did go right in, and he did check, and there was nothing.